Good afternoon. I'm here with Hernando Soto, the president of the Institute for Liberty and Democracy. I'm John Sullivan with the Center for International Private Enterprise. We're an affiliate of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, but we're also part of the National Endowment for Democracy. And we're here to interview Hernando today as part of our new series on economic reformers who have made a real difference in the developing world in changing the terms of debate and in bringing the message of markets and democracy to people all over the world. Of course, Hernando is most well known for his two landmark books. The first one, The Other Path, talked about the informal sector, the underground economy in Lima, Peru, and in particular went into some depth about the fact that many people were blocked out of being part of the formal sector of the economy by a literal wall of red tape that could take up to 329 days to get through. His second book, The Mystery of Capital, is much more wide-ranging in the sense that it covers many more countries, and it really brings us up to date on a lot of the work that Hernando has done in the period between his first book and his second book in pushing forward reform. And in the second book, The Mystery of Capital, he concentrates heavily on property rights. These two themes are very important to cite, and I know they will be to you, people that are involved and engaged around the world in economic reform, because property rights and the informal sector are key parts of what we need to deal with in order to push forward democratic development and democracy that delivers. Well, Hernando, again, thank you for joining us today to do this interview and to inaugurate our series on economic reform around the world. You know, it's become fashionable in Latin America to talk about the fact that there are two lefts: a progressive left, if you will, and a populist left. The progressive left are people like your own president, Alan Garcia, or President Lula in Brazil, President Bachelet of Chile. People with a real agenda who are committed to markets, but who see that you have to deal with the issues of poverty and economic reform in a broader way. On the other hand, there's the populist left, the left of Hugo Chavez, the left of Evo Morales possibly, and of course Fidel Castro. There are a few other countries that are really committed to market reform, countries like Colombia, and again possibly Peru. But what do you think of this idea that there are these two lefts, the left of the progressive left and the populist left? And what does this mean for the future of reform in Latin America?
Well, I think that we have always in Latin America had a pendular movement between those who would go for markets and those who would be against markets, at least nominally so. And the reason for that, of course, is that whenever market reforms take place, they don't take into consideration the last two reforms of the Washington Consensus, which, as you know, has 10 reforms, and the last two, apart from macroeconomic stability, a stable currency, are good property rights, accessible to everybody, and entrepreneurial forms of organization accessible to everybody. And what we have seen in a recent study that we carried out with the Inter-American Development Bank is that literally about some 90% of Latin American businesses don't have all the instruments to get ready for the market. Instruments such as limited liability, instruments such as the possibility of issuing shares to be able to raise investment, bonds to be able to have finance, good property rights so as to be able to get credit, limited liability and asset shielding so as to be able to demarcate how much risk you're going to take. And regarding property rights, it's titles on homes. In the case of Mexico, the only amount of companies or business organizations that can actually fill in the paperwork to export to the United States under the free trade agreement that there is between Mexico and the United States are 7% of the business organizations, and in Peru it's less than 2%. So what has happened is that everybody in Latin America is in the market. I mean, all you have to do is walk the shanty towns, walk the streets, and everybody's making a deal. It's always been that way because the the state only employs a very small part of the population. And indigenous communities are, again, a very small part of the population as well. Everybody is in the market. The thing is that after a while, when the market doesn't reach them because the reforms don't get to them, no matter how sophisticated they are at a macroeconomic level, they tend to vote against somebody, they tend to vote for somebody, or tend to vote for groups or support groups that one way or another have a clarion call of attention against the fact that they've been left out. And that's what's happening when you talk about the populist left of the countries that you've mentioned. I don't think that it's people that don't like the markets. I mean, whenever Latin Americans have had a chance to migrate, they don't go to Cuba. They don't go, and when there was communism, they didn't go to Eastern Europe, they didn't go to Albania, and they didn't go to China. They went to the United States, or they went to market or rented Spain. So it's very clear where we want to go. The thing is that what everybody's realizing now is that it's very hard to actually implement market reforms that are accessible to everybody unless you get very innovative about the whole thing. In other words, that you realize that it's not enough to read the book. You got to open your eyes and see what other things you Americans did in the course of the 19th and 20th century to get there. So I think the future of Latin America is the market. Even if we have populist governments, most of the people are working within the market. The thing is that nobody realizes exactly how much is required to get the market. Talk about our friend Hugo Chavez in Venezuela, who invited us very early on in his regime. He is today probably Latin America's biggest property titler there is. In other words, he has responded to what he considers is obviously a demand of people. The problem is that none of the titles can be sold, they can be leased, can be used as guarantees for credit. So the capitalist system, or the market reform system, isn't complete. But he does at least recognize that all the people that surround the cities of Venezuela, or that are the majority of the cities of Venezuela, do like private property. It just still hasn't gotten to the point to understand that it's not only a possession that they want to protect, but it's also an instrument to develop. But we're getting there very slowly, unfortunately.